All right, welcome to the Sweet Talk. Today is Thursday, March 5th, 2020. I am your host, Kim Matina. I am a Google certified trainer and educator, as well as a gold product expert for the Google for Education team. And today, I am so happy to have on my show Mr. Kyle Anderson. He is a high school special education teacher in Nevada, as well as a Google certified trainer and educator. So, welcome to the show, Kyle.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
And why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? This is basically the first time I'm actually meeting you face to face. I know we follow each other on Twitter, and I know you host and you co-host a couple podcasts. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So, yes, like you said, my name's Kyle Anderson. I'm a special education teacher at high school. Right now in Carson City, Nevada, is where I am at, which is just south of Reno, about 30 minutes, state capital. I taught social studies for 11 years, and then I've done some other different things. I've done stints as a technology coach. I was a school based administrator for a short time, decided I missed the classroom, so went back and I taught PE for a year, and then now I'm teaching special education. And yes, I do co host a couple of different podcasts. I do one called the Podcast by Sons of Technology with my good friend Joe Marquez, where we encourage people to take risks and buck the status quo and try some different things out using technology in the classroom. So you can find that one on all of the podcasting apps. And then I also do a show with my friend Ben Dixon where it is called the Beer EDU podcast, where it's Ben and I, we get together and we geek out about two things that we really enjoy. We geek out about beer and we geek out about education. And we have guests come on and talk about what they're passionate about. And we have a lot of fun with it. We talk a little bit about beer and geek out about that. We do a segment called Learn About Beer, and we have people come on and we cover everything. We've covered esports, we've covered SEL, we've covered all sorts of different things, and it's just a lot of fun to do that show. And that one is also available wherever you get your podcasts. And then I also write a blog at www.andersonedtech.com, or excuse me, .net, excuse me on that one. So that blog there is a lot of reflection of my life and then a lot of implementation of different technology tools in education. I've been writing that one for many years now. And then I also just published a book called To the Edge: Successes and Failures Through Risk Taking, where in this book, I took a look at my life and the different times I've taken risks and analyzed the risks I've taken, the good and the bad that's come out of them, all with the goal of hoping that people can read about my story and then become more risk takers themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like that you can be an inspiration for others, because I'm always trying to encourage people to, explore the unknown, take a risk, because the worst thing that you're going to do is fail and you try again. And really that's not a big deal because it's a learning experience, right? So, I'm one to promote that as well. So, if you can get your word out there using your blog and inspire people to try something new and explore something they're not familiar with, I think it's a great message. So, thanks for doing that, Kyle.
Absolutely. And there's also a website for the book. It's totheedgeedu.com. And there's links on the website to where you can find the book through Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And then I have a subscription list on there where I can send out some updates on the book. And I will periodically maybe do some contests with that subscription list. And then I'm always looking to try to connect with other people as well, maybe do some speaking engagements. So there's different ways to contact me on there with all my social media as well, which speaking of social media, I am on Twitter at Anderson EdTech. And then I'm also on Instagram at Anderson EdTech. And then I have one specifically for the book, To the Edge EDU.
All right, make sure you put that in our Wakelet collection.
Absolutely, will do.
So tonight, Kyle, I know you're going to talk about digitizing the IEP process using Google tools such as Google Forms and Google Keep. And I know like some people have a lot of concerns about putting confidential information up, in the cloud, hosting on Google's domains or Google servers with that information because, it's confidential. You have, privacy information there that you have to consider. So a lot of schools, they kind of use tools that can house that information locally, on their school network or school server or school, computers or whatnot. So, for you to use these tools, I'm really curious to see how you use them and how your school district or yourself, how you keep in mind about the privacy issues as well. So why don't you talk a little bit about the tools that you use, and then we can talk about the privacy issue afterwards.
Well, I actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to address that right off the bat. Well,
Oh, go ahead.
the one thing about confidential information is that when I'm using these tools with Google, like Forms and Sheets and Google Keep, I'm not actually putting any confidential information on there. I'm not even putting student numbers on any of these programs. This is more of a way, the information that I'm collecting for the IEP process that typically is done through an email where somebody will send out an email to gather some
Okay.
information,
Yep.
or if some people are still doing the old paper and pencil where putting in a teacher's mailbox a paper form to have them fill out for information. So when it comes to the actual IEP writing process, I keep all that in my program that I use at my school. So none of the contact information is going out, none of the student numbers or any sort of like anything that it would be FERPA compliant
Yeah.
is going into it. So none of the actual personal information is going into that. And really the only other thing that would maybe possibly go into my form is psychologist reports when I work with them on determination of eligibility for an IEP. There might be a little bit of information on that, but even then I try to limit that as much as possible, again, because there are those concerns where
Yeah.
hacking can definitely happen. And, the last thing you want to do is have confidential information get leaked out. So, and I'm a
Well,
stickler for, because in the special ed world, we still have to do a lot of printing. It's not
yeah.
digitized
There's
like
no way you can get around that.
right. So I'm a stickler for, I have a bin with me at all times that anything that has any sort of personal information on it, even initials, it goes in that bin and then it goes right to the shredder because of those concerns. So, but with those tools that I'm using, they're tools that I use really to simplify the process of gathering the information that I need in the IEP process. So for anybody that's listening that is not a special education teacher, it is a process that it can be very tedious. So it's a very rewarding process. I love working in special education because I get to work with students and get to know them more on a one-on-one basis and get to know them as people rather than just students in the classroom. But it also can be very tedious because not only is there a lot that goes into the IEP writing process, but there's also a lot of legal ramifications with it where you have to address things in certain manners in order to be in compliance with not only federal law, but also state law
Yeah.
and district policy. So I
Yeah.
came up with
Anybody that's involved in the IEP process, we all know. Like anybody, any educator that's working in a public school knows that this paperwork it could take months to actually get a student, identified into the program. So like I'm glad that you're going to be, sharing this, because I think, having all this workflow, make it an easier workflow to gather the information from numerous sources in the school. That can be, a variety of teachers and, even administrators, or even teachers from, previous grades, or any, counselors, or, speech, anybody. It takes a long time. So to hear the workflow that you put together, I'm really curious to see how the collaboration occurs, because the emails and the attachments, that's just too much to keep track of.
Oh, absolutely. And even with the workflow in Gmail, but unfortunately where I work at, we don't use Gmail. We still use Microsoft Outlook. So what that does mean though, I am one of those fortunate people that gets to live in both the Microsoft and the Google world
Same
where
here. Same here.
yeah, which is actually, I mean, I've been a Google teacher for a very long time, and I definitely prefer most of the Google tools over the Microsoft tools, but they all have their merits. So I'm very fortunate that I get to work in a school where I can use Google Classroom and Google Docs, but then at the same time, I can pull something together in Microsoft Word and use Immersive Reader with a student if I need to, which is an absolutely phenomenal tool. But so I'm not able to use the functions of Gmail and Calendar so much in my process, which I have a ton of ideas of how I would do that if I did. But the main one I start out with though is Google Sheets, and some people that are in special ed, their program allows them to export out student information, things like their name, their grade, their qualification, their category of qualification for special education services. But my program doesn't allow me to export those things out. So on day one, when I report back at the beginning of the school year, I create a Google Sheet that is going to house the information of who my students are, what grade they are, what their category of qualification is, whether there are other special factors, whether they have a behavior plan or if they receive services for English language learning, and then when the IEP is due, and then also if it requires a 3-year evaluation. So I create this sheet and get all of these things in here right off the bat at the beginning of the year. Because a lot of times I can copy over from the previous year because I have a lot of the same students, but then I got the incoming freshmen or any new students coming in. So it takes me about an hour to get that all together at the beginning of the year. But then what I've got is I've got a place where I've got all the information I need on my students in one place rather than having to go and search for it. And then what I do with that sheet, once I have it there, then I have a column for once I start scheduling meetings, I have a column for when that meeting is scheduled. And then I have a second column next to that, that once that meeting has been held, I have a little checkbox to mark off that I have completed the process on that IEP.
So this is basically your sheet for your reference, for your eyes only right now.
Absolutely.
This
This
is
one does not
just
get shared to anybody.
right. So this is
Me
just for
only.
you to know who needs what accommodations and so on.
Absolutely. So yeah, the
Okay.
only person that sees this is me. And then I have shown my department head this, and then my principal has seen it before. But other than that, it was more just for they're looking over my shoulder on the screen. It's not anything that I've shared out. So that little bit of personal information that is on this sheet, it's only for me at this
Okay.
point. So I don't feel any danger of compromising any information as a result of that.
Right.
So once I have my caseload all set up, put together, organized with when they're due, then I can start getting going on the process of individual meetings. And the next tool I bring in with that is Google Keep. So, and for those that aren't familiar with Google Keep, just layman's terms would be a sticky note program. So,
Post-it note program, right?
right. And for anybody that hasn't used Google Keep yet, I cannot recommend it enough because there's
Get
so many.
on it.
Yeah, there are so many incredible things you can do with Keep.
Yeah.
A grocery list is one of the cool things I use outside of education, and then geotag it to where when I walk into the grocery store, it pulls my list up without me even having to open the app. But
And you can
that could be
in it.
that could be its own episode, its own on that.
Yeah,
With
exactly.
Google Keep. But what I do is I have a template of a Google Keep note checklist that I have that I copy for each student that I need to hold a meeting with. And what it has on it is the date that the meeting is scheduled, the date and time, and then a whole list of items that I have to take care of throughout the whole IEP process. First of which is contacting the parent to schedule the meeting. So once I do that, then I can add into the top of the note, so and so there. I usually do first initial, last name, IEP, and then schedule of the date and time. So for example, say September 27th or something. And then on that, once I've contacted that parent, I can click the checkbox and then not delete that part of the note, but just cross it off, just like you would do with a regular handwritten checklist. And then I'm required by law to send 3 notices by mail home to the parents. So I will put in their first prior written notice, and then on the day that I send it, I will put the date of what day it is and then click it off my checklist. And then I do that for each of the 3 times that I have to send a notice home. Then I also have in there other parts of the process, such as I need to gather information from the teachers. And I've got Google Forms that I use with the teachers, and I'll talk more about the forms here momentarily, but I will send that form out to the teachers via email. And when I do that, I put on there the date that I did it, and then I can check it off. I also do one for the parent to gather some information from the parent ahead of time. And again, I send out that form, I check it off my list and put the date on there. And then I also have a form that I sit down with the students and complete as well. So talking to them about what their strengths are and what areas that they perceive where they need the most improvement. And then their perceptions on things like their work ethic and their social skills, things of that nature. I kind of have them grade themselves on those things to give me an idea to help me write the plan. And then because I'm with high school, then I also have to talk about transition services, about what their plans are for the future and what kind of things that they're going to need to do in order to achieve that goal. So if they want to go to college, what do they need to do while still in high school to prepare them for that? Or maybe I have a student that wants to go to the military and what they need to do in order to do that. Or some of them, they just want to get a job afterward. Well, what kind of job do you want? What are your interests and your strengths? What are things you like to do? It's a really rewarding process working with the kid on that, because again, I get to know them as more than just a student. I get to know them as a person. Where when I start to find out that I have a student that loves football and plans to be an underwater welder later in life, and then I become very envious knowing how well off he's going to be, because that's such a highly paid skill to have at
Yeah.
this point.
So
So
that's a cool process that you have there. It seems like you have it like really down to a T as far as like what you need to do and how you document everything. Now, my question, let me ask you this. So you have a Google Keep note for every student in your class, correct?
for each one of my caseload, yes.
Okay. And then do you link that note to your sheet or no? Do you just open up the app when you need it?
No, I just open it up when I need it.
Okay.
It's just something that I've honestly never thought to do something like that, and now you're making me look to maybe see if I can actually do
Yeah,
that now.
I mean,
So
it's I
yeah,
don't really know why you would do that, only because, it's only for you. You have the app, you open the
right.
app when you need it. I was just curious, you know?
So I have that one for every student, and then once the whole process is done, what I do is that you can minimize the list in Google Keep, and then I don't delete them. I don't archive them. At this point, I just unpin it, because when I have the process going on, I always pin that note at the top in Keep. So that's the first thing I see when I open up Keep. And that way it's right there in front of my
Right
face.
in
So
your
then
yeah.
when I'm done, then I just unpin that, and then I keep that in my Google Keep for as long as I
As long
want
as you
to.
need it, right?
Because what it also does, not only is it a checklist that keeps me on task for the whole process, but it's also a great way to document the contacts that I've made. I also will go into my IEP writing program and document any sort of contact as well. But if there's ever a question where, say, for example, a teacher comes back and says, well, I never received anything from you in regards to this student. I said, well, on this date, I emailed you this form here. So I have that documentation. So I'm very type A when it comes to a lot of these things. So I try to stay as organized as possible with that. So, but yeah, it's just a really great way to keep myself on task, and then also to document the whole process. And then I keep those things there, and then it makes it easy. So then when the next student comes in, then I can get that process going as well. And then I also use some of the other features like the color coding. So if I've got multiple IEPs in process, I can color code one red, one blue, one green. That way I'm looking at the different notes, knowing that they're for these different students.
So you color code them for different students, different grade levels, different statuses of where they are in your process? Like, how do you
It's more random than that.
just
It's more of
random?
just I just do a color for, if I've got student A, I color code that one red. The next one comes in, student B, I'll color code that one orange,
Oh, okay.
just so they're different.
Just so
The,
they're different.
the one thing I do is that when I have the Google Forms in Drive, I create a folder for each student and house the forms and the responses in that folder. And I color code the folder as red when it's in process. And then when it's done and I've completed that IEP, I will color code the folder as green and then put it into not an, I don't want to call it an archive folder, but I have a folder for like 2019, 2020 IEPs. I then put that folder inside that folder after I'm done with the process.
Right, right, right. So that's a good way of kind of covering yourself as well in case you have to go back and look at anything. You have everything all in that one folder.
Right, and then I've got the folders from the previous year as well, so that way if there's a question at all, say for example, one of my students goes to another case manager, and then they say, "Do you have any information on this student or anything?" I can actually go back to that folder and say, "Well, this is what I gathered from last year," so I still have
Yeah.
all that information.
Now, do you ever use, okay, so I get your workflow with the Google Keep app. Do you end up using the Google Keep note and copying the information into a Google Doc, or is it just strictly right? Everything you're doing is right within the
I
Keep.
just keep it within Keep because there's nothing in my IEP writing process that requires me to use docs at all.
Okay.
So I just everything is just housed in Keep with that. So it's just right there. So if there was ever a time where I got docs involved in it, I do love that feature in Google Docs now where you can just drag stuff over from Keep and put it in there. So now if there ever was a question with any of the process where say one of my IEPs goes to do process and they needed evidence of any sort of contact, I have that Google Keep note that I can drag into a Google Doc and make it easier to print rather than, say taking a screenshot of it and sharing that in the process or something.
Right. No, well, that's just, I was just thinking, because sometimes people use the Keep note and then they copy the note into the doc and then they work from the doc. So
Right.
that's why I was asking. So after you do all this, now you need to gather information from the teachers.
Right.
And
So I have three different Google forms that I've created. They're very similar in nature, but they're designed for a specific person or group of people. Where the first one is the teacher form, where I put together this form that asks who the teacher is, what class they teach, the student's current grade in the class, and then there's some different things that I ask, like what are the students' strengths, and then what do you perceive them to be the areas where they need the most improvement. And then same thing, I mentioned the rating system where I have the student rate themselves on things like their behavior, their social skills. I have this teacher do a rating system as well, to their perception of how the student is doing in their class in regards to their work ethic and their behavior and whatnot. And then I also give them the opportunity, I put a box in there if they want to explain any of those. So if, for example, they put in there that the student's behavior in the class needs improvement, I would like to know why they believe that. So I put a box in there where they can write out the reason why they mark the student in that fashion. And then I also ask the teachers for any ideas on accommodations that may be helpful in that class, such as sitting near the front, or if the student would benefit from having parts of tests read to them, things of that nature. And then just a general comment at the end, if there's anything else that they feel would be important to the process, I give them the opportunity to fill that out as well. And then I have another form that I send to the parents that's very similar to that one for the teachers, where the parent can provide their input as well. Now, unfortunately, I don't get a lot of responses back from the parent one. Parents are busy. Some parents in this day and age, they just don't use email as much. But again, it's an opportunity that I value parental input in the IEP process, and B, it gives me the opportunity to get that input from them by sending this form in. And if a parent chooses not to fill it out, that's their prerogative. I understand that. So, and I can always get that information throughout the process with a phone call or at the IEP meeting, but I like to be able to have that as documentation. So I always put that form together for the parents, and it's very similar to the teacher one, where the parents are able to say what they believe their child's strengths are, areas for improvement, things of that nature. And then the student one, of course, where I sit down with the student and talk them out, and I fill the form out as we're talking about their strengths, things they like to do, what they want to do later in life after high school, how they perceive themselves in their abilities with social skills, behavior, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so what that gives me then is I have three different ways to document the input that I can then use for the IEP process. Now, for the most part, I don't necessarily copy and paste it into the IEP because it definitely needs to be cleaned up a lot of times, but it makes life a little bit easier for me by having it all in one place. It's on that Google Sheet response form instead of, if, for example, I did an email, now it's say 6 or 7 different emails
Yeah.
and then coming in at different times. It's all housed in one place. And then also, if I was doing the paper one, I know for a fact that my handwriting is atrocious, and many teachers do not have the best handwriting. Now having to decipher handwriting becomes an issue. So the Google form is just something that it just saves my time. And really all these tools, the Google Sheet that I do with the caseload at the beginning of the year, the keep notes that I keep on each student, and then these forms, they're all designed for efficiency and just making life easier with everything.
Yeah, I really do like that workflow because I just feel like sometimes, if I mean, it seems like you've been doing this for years, like because you kind of got the workflow down pat, and I'm sure you tweak it a little bit as you go through the cases or your students or even the years. You make it better and you change things up, but for the most part, like 95% of it, you know what you're doing already. And I like that. I always try to tell people, like, you invest the time in the beginning, you get rewarded at the end by having more time.
Right.
So you put the time in and the front load and you design whatever you need. And then at the end, you get that time back. It's an investment, and it's nice because now you have everything all collected in, like you said, the response sheet. So if you wanted to, you can share that sheet with somebody else, maybe on your team or another teacher that needs that information as well, or even to share that workflow. Do you have support in using that workflow at your school? Do other teachers use that workflow or digitize their information and gather in information, or are you kind of like the soul man here?
Well, I'm going to let you in on a secret first. This is actually only my second year in special education,
Oh,
so I'm honored.
really?
I'm honored to hear you say that. It sounds like I've been doing this for years, but
Yeah, it
it's
sounds
really
well. You've been in education for many years, though, so you
right. I've
have
been an educator for
been
15, and I've
exposed
been a
to the
Google
process
educator for
already.
many years. So yeah, it's more of a, I've just been using the tools for a long time and just have created this system for myself that works for me. And now, in regards to your question about whether my colleagues are using it too, I actually just about a month ago presented on a staff development day to my department my whole system. So I share an office with a couple of my colleagues, and my one colleague is always losing her sticky notes. And she's always freaking out trying to find her sticky notes. And I've been telling her for a long time, I really need to sit down and show you my system here. So then on staff development day, my department had required that all the special ed teachers came to my session so I could show them this. And they're starting to come around into it a little bit more. They've been asking me some questions on how to use it a little bit more and how I go about even just copying the forms for each student, because when it comes to those forms, I create a new form for each one. So it's all separate. I don't want to mix
Yeah,
information and have them on the same sheet. So, and it's just a quick make a copy on
right.
everything. So it's not a lot of extra work on my part because I have the templates that I made for each form. And then it's just a quick make a copy and then rename it with the student's name every time I do that. So my colleagues are starting to ask me some more questions about it and starting to learn the process a little bit more because they saw and because I was doing it with my department, I was able to actually show them my exact things because
You're
we,
doing
we
it
have,
real time.
yeah, I was doing it in real time, and then we have a lot of the same students, so there wasn't that danger of sharing out personal information. So when it comes to when I've also done this session at various conferences where I've showed my workflow, where I'm taking screenshots of my stuff instead and then blurring out the information. That way, people can see a real life example of it instead of just hearing me talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to actually see. I know you said in the beginning of the show before we went on air that you were going to share some of your templates. Like, I would be curious to see what they look like as well, and then maybe I can pay it forward and or you can pay it forward to me, and I can share it with people at my school because it is a grueling process. Like I'm a parent of a my son had he was classified with an IEP later in elementary school, and the process that I remember I mean, I'm going back 15 years. The whole process was drooling. I mean, it was so long to get all the information.
Mhm.
As a parent, I'm talking about. I wasn't even an educator at that point. I was substitute teaching at that point, like really starting out in my career. And the whole process is just really slow. It's really draining. And, and I remember all this paperwork, and the paperwork, from what you're saying, is still there. Like they didn't, you still have all this paperwork. I mean, pages and pages of paperwork
Mhm.
with things that you have to have, because it's a state law, it's a state document, federal law, and then things that, the school district with the policies. It's just, there's a lot, and as a parent going through this, it can be stressful. Now you're in high school, so by the time students get to high school, most of them, I would think that they're already classified, but in the beginning stages of a student's school, in elementary school, that's when students are becoming, identified as with special education needs. So, that process back in elementary school can be very straining and stressful for parents and students because they're not getting the accommodations that they need. And they're stressed, they're struggling, and there's issues. So once the whole process is over and they're identified and they're getting the needs that they have to get, I think the stress levels drop a lot. So if this can help, collaboration with teachers and school administrators and help the process speed up a little bit by just getting the information, I think it'll be really helpful for everyone involved, not just the students, not just the teachers, but parents and everyone that's involved. Because, like I said, as I went through it, and it's just stressful. It's not fun. It's for people that don't are not familiar with it, it's very um scary, you know.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to remember like how I felt, and it's not fun, seeing your child struggle and get frustrated and be stressed out. It's not fun.
No, and I do have my Google Forms templates and then the Google Sheet that I do to set up my caseload. I will provide some forced copy templates of those that
Yeah, please
I
do.
can put in the Wakelet collection. That way, anybody that has access to that can go on there and just click on it. And it'll ask you to make a copy of it, and then you can take a look at it. And if it's something you want to use as is, great. If you want to
You can
change
tweak
it up
it.
and to fit your needs a little bit, absolutely great too. If you don't want to use it at all, if it's just not for you, that's fine
That's
too.
fine too.
I'll never know. But
Yeah.
as much as I would like to share the Google Keep stuff, that one,
Yeah, that's confidential information. You
yeah,
can't.
that one, those ones I can't do. But
That's just basically it's a note, it's a list, it's a to-do list.
right.
It's a list that keeps track of what you need to do next. And basically, if you're using a Post-it note, Google Keep is an electronic app that allows you to keep track of notes and to-do lists and just different, tasks. And it's just it's Kyle's list of things that he needs to do in his own process of getting this information, gathering this information. So, I wouldn't want you to share that information. I'm just glad that you gave an explanation of what how you use it.
Mhm.
But I really feel like a lot of this will help with the IEP process with students that are just becoming identified.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it's just gathering the information from people and who has time to do it and sit there and write? And like you said, trying to decipher handwriting. If everything's all electronic, it's all easier. It's easier for everyone.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into how you can use this with Google Calendar and Gmail as well. And as much as I would love to talk about that more, I can't really go into it too much because again, my district we use Outlook for our calendar and our email. But between setting up the reminders with Google Keep that can push out to calendar to where you can do that, you can set up triggers on your forms that when somebody submits the form, you could have them send a confirmation email back to the person that you sent this on this day, and or even like a thank you. I mean,
Yeah.
I would love to if I had the ability with my email system now to set up like using something like Formule in that Google sheet where the teachers or the parents are sending their stuff in. I would love to be able to just send them a thank you for responding, just because they're taking time out of their day in order to provide you with that information that's so vital. And sometimes all it takes just to make a person feel good is just that simple thank you email. And I
Thank
would
you.
love to be able to set that up. So if my district ever goes to Gmail and calendar, I that's definitely something I plan on setting up.
Yeah, yeah, I don't blame you. But and a workaround is you can put a thank you message in at the end of the form when they submit.
Right.
So I mean, you can put a little bit a personalized note in there as well. But yeah, I'm with you. Like my district is in the same boat as you. We use Outlook for our mail. So I get the best of both worlds as well. And it's nice so that you're not limited to just one type of ecosystem, right? So you kind of just it's got its good points and bad points,
For
but
sure.
you just make do with what you have.
Absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing all of that information, that whole workflow. I really think like I wish that, you know, like I said, when I was going through this as a parent, when my son was in elementary school, that this whole process was digitized, and that they had all this information readily available quickly, because I think, like I said, it would have been less stressful. So
Mhm.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this because I think it's very important for educators to all be on the same page. We're all working together. We need to help each other and support each other. And this is just something that you came up with to help yourself. And now it seems like you're going to help others in your school and in your maybe in your district with this. So I think this is great. And I really appreciate you sharing. So thanks, Kyle.
And I appreciate you having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope that your listeners can get a little bit of something out of this, because it's something that I love sharing things out. And if I can have an effect on one person in a positive manner, then I definitely feel I've done my job.
And you were successful. That's the way I am too. So with that said, I'm going to close the show. So let me share my screen. So I have to do left-handed now. So bear with me here. All right. I'm getting really good with my left hand.
I'm left-handed, so
Oh, well, I'm a righty and I had elbow surgery, so
yeah.
I am adjusting here. So if you'd like to visit my website is www.thesweettalk.com. That's the SUITE talk.com. And on the homepage, you'll see tonight's episode listed here as well. If you'd like to be a guest on my show, you can fill out the guest form and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Right now, I'm scheduling for the summertime. Um, if you'd like to join the Facebook community, you can. I have a group for the Sweet Talk. There's trending episodes and podcast links here as well. Um, and if you would like to subscribe, I am on YouTube. You can subscribe to my newsletter, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Google Podcasts as well. Any past episodes will be on the episode page, and you can watch any past episodes on YouTube, and the show notes are a Wakelet, so you can click on that. And for all of you that use Google Classroom, Alice Keeler and I wrote a book. It's called Stepping Up to Google Classroom. and it's geared for beginners. So it's 50 steps for beginners to get started. It should be out by ISTE, but if you would like to be notified, you can subscribe to Alice's newsletter by clicking on this link here, and you will be notified as soon as the book comes out. And with that said, let me stop sharing my screen, and I'm back. So yeah, I'm really excited about my book with Alice. It's gonna be it's really gonna be it's a learning experience for me. I never, this is my first time
Hmm.
authoring a book with with anyone. So for me, it's been a great journey and learning experience, and I'm really thankful for it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
really,
congratulations. I'm actually going to see Alice in a couple of weeks at Spring Q.
oh yeah, if it's not canceled, right?
Yeah. Everybody's freaking out about coronavirus. Like, just wash your hands. Don't cough on anybody. Come on,
Yeah,
people.
covering them, it's common sense, right?
Yeah.
I know.
So
But,
we all
this is
survived bird flu and swine flu and SARS
yeah,
and Ebola. We'll be fine with this one too.
yeah, we'll get through it. But anyway, well, thanks, Kyle, for being on. I really appreciate it. Stay in touch, and
Absolutely.
make sure, you definitely put in your information in that weeklet collection.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will get on there. Let me double check that the email came through real quick, and then so yeah, collaborate on.
All right, well, let me
Yep,
end.
here it is. Yep, here it
Got
is.
it?
Yep.
All right. Well, don't hang up. All right, so that concludes the show for tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great evening. Bye.